Now that we have travelled down the road mapped out for us a little way and we started to get haircuts and pay for frothy coffees, I wanted to take a few moments in this video just to explain how and why St Mark's will be like it will be over the next few months as we emerge together from this long, cold, hard winter in Tier 4 and then in lockdown. I wanted to do so to start off with a story and explain and discover the why of what we're going to do, and then at the end I'll get into the nitty gritty. So if you're a nitty gritty detailed person, don't scan forward too fast, because remember, we've always said this, the why we do what we do is more important than the what we end up doing. The why is our driving force. Somewhere around the middle of your Bible is a book named after a guy called Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a cupbearer to a king who was an overlord who had ruled over the people of Israel who'd been carted off into exile. It happened decades ago, and Nehemiah now finds himself longing for home. He manages to convince the king to let him back to Jerusalem, this place he longed to go to, that he'd heard so much about, that it was his ancestral heritage. He wanted to go back and to rebuild all that had been destroyed by the armies, the invading armies that came in and carted everybody off into exile. He knew that back in Jerusalem was still living the remnants, they were called, the people that hadn't been strong enough or able to walk far enough or gifted or talented or beautiful enough to be carried off into exile. So he knew there were the remnants of the people, and there was the kind of destroyed ruins of Jerusalem and the area around it. And he wanted to rebuild. He wanted to return from exile. This story has been an instructive guide for Christian communities for thousands of years, ever since, as they begin to think, what is it like to return from exile? What is it like to re-inhabit a place you used to be in? What is it like to build together? And the together is part of it. If you don't know the story, if you're unfamiliar with it, dive in and read it. You can read it in a few minutes on your phone. And that will help as you begin to think about what it is for St Mark's. There are a couple of things that Nehemiah leads the people through as they go back to Jerusalem, as they survey all that's happened to Jerusalem, and as they then begin to rebuild the city walls and recreate the city of their dreams, if you like. There are a few things he does which I think are really helpful guides to us, and which will guide what we do and why we're going to do it. The first thing they do is they remember and they realize. They remember what Jerusalem used to be like. They remember the stories that they used to hear. They remember the legends. They remember some of them might have been some kind of first-hand account, some eyewitnesses' accounts, some old people who remembered what it was like, I don't know. But they remember what Jerusalem used to be like, and they realize, honestly, that it isn't like that anymore. And this is a key first step. You can't rush past this step, because many of us will be carrying, if we were to stop and to pause and to remember and to realize the destruction that's happened to our lives and to our families and to our villages and to our workplaces and to our society and to our sense of health and stability, as we realize the destruction that's been wrought upon that over the last few months. It causes something deep inside us to mourn, to lament, to be hurt. And so it's important that we don't rush past it, that we remember the good times we had. And this video is about St Mark's, but you can take these principles and apply them to any areas of your life. That those of us who were around 18 months ago before COVID, that we remember what it was like to be a part of St Mark's then, and how great it was to rush into whichever venue we were in that week, and we'd sit round tables, and sometimes we sat with family members, sometimes we didn't, sometimes our kids went off and played with other adults, and sometimes those of us who were adults looked after other people's kids, and it was all village, and we passed food around a lot, and we ate and drank and played games, and it was all table and proximate and close, and it was good. And we have some great memories, either in our minds or in our phones, of things that we did, and it's important to remember those. And it's important to realize what's been lost over the last year or so. There are people in the village now who some of us have never met physically. We only think they exist in a top half format. We don't know. Do they have legs, or are they like an octopus? Who knows? Because we've only ever seen them on Zoom. We need to realize that some children were kind of babes in arms, just being born at the start of the pandemic, and now they're walking around and talking, and they don't recognize our faces, and that's horrible. That's sad, because we wanted to be a part of their lives and we wanted to help their parents. We need to realize that some of us have found this emotionally, physically, mentally, an incredibly tough or isolating year, when it's literally been the hardest job of our day just to keep going and make it to the end. And we've struggled because we've wanted to see people, but when we see people on screen, that also fatigues us. Some of us need to realize the repercussions for our finances, for our businesses, for our dating life, the stress it's put on our family relationships, the amount we've missed out with wider family and friends, the people that have moved on, the experiences, the water that's gone under the bridge, and we haven't been a part of that. Of course, some of us have really enjoyed lockdown, and we've maybe our bubbles have been set up to win, and maybe we've saved a load of money on not buying frothy coffees, and our finances are doing okay, and we've actually really embedded ourselves in new traditions and new rhythms and new rituals in our homes or in our bubbles, in our streets and our neighbourhoods. We're enjoying working from home, and we need to realise those things too. That over the last 14, 15 months, the pandemic and everything that's rolled on from that has hit us in different ways, but in large ways each. So the first thing as we begin to re-emerge is remembering what used to be, realizing what is. And for some of us, I would encourage, that means an audit, that means a stock take of our lives right now, and just pausing and go, why is it that I feel heavy? What is that sadness? What is that I'm missing? What is it that when there's just this pang somewhere when I see somebody else and I think, I don't recognize you because I haven't been a part of your life for so long, or I find it hard to turn up on Zoom or in person anymore because I feel like I'm on the outskirts now, way more than I used to, of our little gang. We need to remember and we need to realize. The second thing that we're able to do, the second thing that Nehemiah and his crew start to do, is they start to repair and to rebuild. They find this destroyed shell of a city, but it's got some gates that work. It's got some walls that have foundations and maybe kind of waist high up. It's got some ramparts. It's got some houses, and some of these need rebuilding. But that's one of the major jobs that Nehemiah leads the people through. If they're going to have a city that is worth defending and that they're able to defend in the future, they've got to rebuild the walls. They've also got to repair some wells and some cisterns. They've got to repair the roads that have been destroyed. And just as it was true for them, it's true for us. There's some aspects of our village that we'll be able to repair and to rebuild. We'll be able to meet again, and we'll be able to experience somehow the sharing of food and the sharing of space and the playing of games and the creating life moments and memories together. We'll be able to repair the relationships which have stalled or changed or have kind of stuck on Zoom for a little while. Have you noticed that on Zoom it feels a lot more deliberate, and we haven't had those inconsequential, incidental moments where we've laughed at a pigeon that's accidentally missed its landing spot together, or we've done the washing up and dried up next to each other and just chatted about life and gone way deeper than we ever intended to, or we had a whisk in the pancake mix competition just because we happened to be the last person to say, no, I don't want to take part in that competition. All these things, all this kind of depth of relationship, all this sense of familiarity with one another, all this ability to be at ease in the village, to contribute to something bigger and greater than ourselves, to help others with a heavy burden. All of these things will be repaired and rebuilt. And that's something that we are all going to be involved with. The third thing that it's important to note is that not everything can be repaired. Some of it's just gone. We recognise that in our first kind of moment where we said that's gone. That moment has passed. Not everything can be rebuilt and repaired. And if we thought about it, we wouldn't want to. Some of the stuff that was true about St. Mark's 18 months ago, well, we didn't like it maybe, or it could have been better, or it's just the time's moved on. And so we're not repairing and rebuilding, but we're replacing and we are renewing. We are making new again. We're not just building what used to be and trying to hark back to some era through rose-tinted spectacles where everything was great, but actually we're going to renew what we are as community. We're going to renew how we are together. We're going to renew relationships and friendships and conversations. We're going to renew our place as servants in the city to love and to care for those who find themselves in the shadows of life. We're going to renew our banquet table, which has always been a source of pride, of life, of joy for us, that anybody's welcome. Well, we're going to renew that because we care about the banquet table. We have to put our chairs a little bit further apart than we used to, and that's a problem because we want it to be close to one another and to share in each other's lives. We're going to have to figure that out and find out new ways of doing it. If we think about it, we probably don't all want to rush into a gathering together in a physical space every Sunday in a new place and listening to a sermon and thinking about something around a table. We might want to try out different ways of being together. It turns out there are some things that can happen perfectly well online, thanks very much, maybe even better. It turns out that we can create space in our busy weeks for play and for enjoyment and for rest and for Sabbath if we do things differently. So, we remember and we recognize. We repair and we rebuild. And we replace and we renew. And it should be said that all three of those are cyclical. We move in and out of each one of these. There'll be, just when we think we're done with the remembering and the recognizing, it will hit us that suddenly there's something else that we'd forgotten, but we've moved on to repairing or to renewing, and we have to cycle back through again and go, oh no, I'd forgotten about that, and I missed that. Maybe at Christmas, we'll be looking forward to a Christmas Carol event, and we'll be imagining what they were like 2 or 3 years ago, and then we'll suddenly realize again, oh no, it's going to be different because it's winter and there's flu and there's new variants and all of that. And maybe some of those things will be driven by our realizations. Some of those things will be driven by external factors like new variants, like vaccines going out of control and everybody growing a fourth leg or a third leg. Who knows? It'll be cyclical and we'll move in and out of each of these stages. So as we do that, there's a couple of important things, otherwise it all falls flat. The first is, although Nehemiah in the story gets a whole load of credit for being out front and calling people to do the jobs and giving out and delegating the tasks, it isn't all about him. There's no way Nehemiah could build a whole city on his own, and there's no way any one of us could do this on our own. The whole reason Nehemiah and his story have remained as an instructive guide, when there are, of course, more in-depth, more specific, more 2021 guides that have been written, is that it's communal. It's different. It's not just a business rebuild and a rebrand. It's not just building up the walls. It's not just one person adopting leadership and everybody else following. It's a communal task where the whole town, in Nehemiah's case, the village in our case, everybody gets together. Everybody is involved with it. Some people are able to do massive, front and center, key jobs which everything else relies on. Somebody has to build the big gate on the main road into Jerusalem. Other people have to sort out the sewage system. Other people are responsible for looking after some kids for a day whilst everybody else does some work, and then they all swap around the next day. Some people are kind of warriors, and they're out there with their swords and their shields and their spears looking out for attack. Everybody has a different role, and without everybody's different role in Nehemiah's story, Jerusalem never gets rebuilt. And it's exactly the same for us. It requires commitment on everybody's part. Committing to the community and saying, I'm going to be part of this. I'm going to be part of the rebuilding and the renewing of St. Mark's Village. I'm going to be part of the future of it. I'm going to play my part. I'm committed to the community. I'm going to turn up in conversation, and I'm going to listen deeply to people, and I'm going to remember to pray for them, and I'm going to be stirred in my spirit to help them. I'm going to be committed to the community. I'm going to celebrate each little milestone as we go. In the story, every now and again, Nehemiah and the troops, they're all going to gather and they'll pray and they'll worship and they'll say, look at what we've done. Is it the best wall in all of the world? No. Will it keep out all the invading armies? No. Is it better than what it used to be? Yes. And they celebrate. And that's important for us too. There's going to be moments over the next few months where we have a gathering and it isn't perfect and it doesn't feel like you've necessarily got to be as close to everyone as you want it to. Why? Because they were nervous and they wanted to stay 2 meters away, and you're a hugger and you're okay with taking your mask off, but somebody else isn't, and it feels like we're restrictive and you want to run at a different speed to somebody else, slower or faster. Committed to the community, celebrating each win as it happens, and worshipping as we go. Remembering this isn't just a rebuilding of a charity or of an interest group or a bunch of people have got nothing better to do. We've got lots of great things to do, and we don't gather around anything else other than Jesus. And so we want to do this prayerfully and worshipfully and ask that the voice of the Master would continually lead us down and give us courage to follow new paths, different paths, not just to hark back to how it used to be. So, for the detail ninjas amongst you, here's what the next few months will look like to the best of my knowledge today, and who knows what will be released on the news tonight, which will change all of that. I don't think there's going to be a new European Super League of Churches, and if there is, we won't be joining it, because we are committed to being people of faith in Jesus and growing in our faith, in hope, and giving hope, sowing hope in places of darkness across the city to those who don't have hope because life is too hard, and people of love who share life with one another, who share food and break bread with one another, who give each other their ear and listen deeply and attentively, who pray for one another, love one another. Faith, hope, and love. That's who we are. We don't need to buy into the lie that church is reopening because it never shut. We don't need to rush into some rhythm of meeting that revolves around sitting in rows and listening to somebody else because we think that faith is life-giving and fun and joy-filled, and it isn't just confined to Sunday morning, and it isn't best done in rows. And so we can continue with our model of investing in our core, of finding a few people that we can share with deeply and profoundly as we travel through each day, of being together as village in a way that sometimes involves focused study and learning, sometimes involves passing on the faith and teaching about the faith, sometimes involves a frisbee, sometimes involves fish and chips, sometimes involves a picnic or a walk, sometimes involves serving others and loving and packing food parcels or whatever. We can be that village still, and we will. Our default, therefore, will be always thinking through what can we do that's life-giving and joy-filled, what can we do that keeps people safe. So when we gather, it will be default on Zoom still, at least until the summer, unless we're going to go out and have a walk or a picnic or a game of rounders and be together. And as we open up and as spring happens and turns into summer, we'll be able to do that more and more regularly. Commit to the community and invest in a walk with somebody else and turn up, because they're not bolt-ons. Those things are not added extra. Those things are not, church light. Those things are where relationship is formed, and the depth that we've all been craving in relationship with each other over the past 18 months, where we get to rebuild and to renew that. So we'll continue on Zoom over the next term. There are Zoom gatherings on Sundays, there are picnics and walks on Sundays, there are games afternoons on Sundays and Saturdays, there are different things throughout the week, there are times carved out just for worship and prayer and just for moments that will hopefully be sacred holy spaces at which we might be able to remember and recognize and ask for the good, healthy, gracious kindness of Jesus to heal wounds that have been inflicted over the past little while. But there is work to do still. And we still want to package as many meals as we can to help as many children as we can who would otherwise go to bed hungry tonight. We're excited that the Sanctuary Project is lifting off, and we need to do some work to get our house in order that we might be a safe space for survivors of abuse increasingly. There is all kinds of work to do. There is the opportunity to dive in and spend time with young people who you haven't seen for a year, and to reintroduce yourselves into their life as somebody who's important to them and who can be a key part of their village. In the meantime, gang, may you this week, having watched all of this, be blessed with the healing presence of the Master, who also recognizes all that's been lost this year to you and in your life. May the Spirit of Jesus begin to replace all that has been lost, to heal where there is hurt, to rush in with compassion where there is a void caused by anxiety and loneliness. And may that same kind Jesus begin to whisper to you of what your job might be in the renewing of all that is good.